Yeah. So since I didn't start recording earlier, let me just trace it up back to that point. So we are trying to define a function, limit of a function at a point. So function is defined on some set E, subset of R, and we want to define limit. What do we mean by limit x goes to a fx equal to theta? So first attempt would be to simply say for all epsilon, there is a delta such that whenever x and a differ by less than delta, fx minus and theta differ by less than epsilon. But this will force you to also allow x to be equal to a when a is in the set E. So if x is not in, if a is, yeah, here x has to be in the set E because we want to talk about fx. So it is understood, or we can explicitly write x belongs to E. But what if a belongs to E? Then that will force that fa to be equal to theta. Otherwise, this limit will not be defined, will not exist. So what is common is this. Okay, but sometimes this index, these things can also be written below the limit notation. So one can equally well write x not equal to a. Some people may write. So, but the commonly used meaning of if you see some contradiction in some book, then the book may have a different way of defining the limit as x goes to a. Also, in the context, what set E, the domain of f will always be defined when you are starting about limit. So often this part is omitted and is not kind of listed separately. It is understood that we are talking about x in E, but to be precise, no harm in adding that. Okay. So two more points. Suppose f is from a, b to R. So there is an open interval, then there is a both a and b are not there in the set of the domain. Then from the convention I used above, okay, this limit means what? X minus a should be strictly positive and less than delta, and x should be in E. So this kind of will force that x is in this set. So as x is strictly above a and coming close to a. So this is often or equally written as limit x down arrow a. So down arrow makes it clear that you are approaching a from the right, because x is above a and is approaching a. And again, books, some books even in this allow x to be equal to a, but when they want it to be the x equal to be excluded, they will put two lines here. Double arrow. This just makes it very clear. It's like positive and strictly positive, some conventions in books. Okay, but I will use this notation. It implies that x is strictly above a. In any case, when we are talking of limits of functions, the the limiting point, the A, even if it is in the domain, is excluded from the consideration. And likewise, is the same as limit equal to beta. And for now, at least, we are excluding alpha and beta to be allowed to be infinity. Limit exists, then it has to be finite. If the book also defines, if a book defines limit equal to infinity also is given a meaning, then you have to say limit exists and is finite. But we are not giving any such meaning. We are not using that notation. So for us, when the limit exists, it must be finite for now. So so this we can decode as, saying the same thing is that as for all epsilon, there exists a delta such that 0 less than so we can write it like this, or we can write it as a less than x less than a plus delta. Both mean the same thing. Okay. So the point is x is to the right, x is inside the set, so it must be in the interval a to b open, and it should be at most delta distance from a. So whatever notation we use, 0 x minus a less than delta, or this is the same meaning. Okay. And one of you had written an email to me that isn't continuity then follows with. So if we had originally started with this notation, the meaning of limit as a x goes to a, then we can say that f from e to r is continuous if and only if limit x going to y, fx is equal to fy for all y belonging to E. Okay. So it all depends on, do you define continuity first, or do you define limit of a function as x approaches some point? Okay. So since I first took up continuity, I defined it directly, and now we are noting that it is the same as this. Somebody may take this as the definition. So there are so many things where you could use any of the, whenever there is a if and only if thing, that means either of them can be used as definition and then the other becomes a characterization. Okay. So main thing to note was to start with the concept of limit of a function as the limit of fx as x approaches a point. And main thing to note is that we do not insist that the point is inside the domain, and even if it is, that value is not taken in. So if I take f and I define g of x equal to 1, x is greater than equal to 0 and 0 if x is less than 0. Okay. So I have, so these are both these functions, these are two values 1 and 0, and the only difference is that x equal to 0. So f of 0 is 0, but f of g of 0 is 1. Okay. But the way we have defined limit of x decreasing to 0, fx is equal to limit y decreasing to 0, g of y. Both of them are the same meaning, but sorry. So sometimes this is said that g is continuous at 0 from the right. And all other points anyway, f and g are continuous. So at 1, the function g is sometimes called right continuous. That means as you approach from the right hand side, you are continuous things, but of course g is not left continuous. That means if you take the limit from below, limit x increases to 0, fx is equal to limit x increases to 0, g of x is, both of them are equal to 0, and therefore x is left continuous, but g is not left continuous. Neither of f and g are continuous function because there is one jump. So you say that there is one discontinuity, and even when you lose continuity, you can still have a situation where it is right continuous but not left continuous but not right continuous. And the meaning is exactly clear from these two examples. Okay. It is clear that at all other points, these both f and g are continuous, but only at 0 there is a question mark. Both are not continuous at 0. One of them is right continuous, the other one is left continuous at 0. Okay.
So how do we define right continuity and left continuity?
So exactly this example. So right continuity means limit from above equals the value. Want me to write down the definition? Or you need not even be here. So for right continuity, the point should be in E, and then we are defining it that limit as y decreases to x, fy is equal to fx. Left continuous will be, the decreases will be replaced by increases. Okay. We don't use it much in our course, but some other course may use it. For example, you have your learning probability, and maybe in the course on probability somewhere there may be requirement of learning what is right continuous or left continuous. Okay. So in any case, in constructing examples of something failing, something not working, etc., etc., this is a very simplest kind of example. You don't have to write down a whole lot of things. This is what is called, it has exactly one jump at 0. And then at 0, one you define it to be the lower point, and the other one you define it to be the upper point. So construction of examples of various kinds, this F and G as I have written here are very useful. Okay. So for continuous function, what are our major results that you need to kind of remember and you can use them elsewhere? Definition. Then continuity definition means the same as sequential definition. So if every sequence approaching x, fxn converges to fx, then this is same as f is continuous at x. And if it holds for every x, either way you get that is continuous on the set. Okay. Then closed and bounded interval continuity means uniform continuity. And the intermediate value property or intermediate value theorem. Okay. If you have a function defined on an interval, open, close, doesn't matter, and you have 2 points, and f of u and f of v, to take any point in between f of u and f of v, that will also be attained. Okay. That's the other important result we need to remember. So my agenda for today is to move to the next theme, which is differentiability. And I'm sure you have, in your class 12, you have done what does differentiable mean, and you not only that, you would have been able to compute derivatives of all kinds of complicated questions, complicated examples, and prove results about that. But maybe some of you, even in the school, it may have been taught in a very proper definition. For some of you, it may not have been taught properly, but proper definition, but you know what it means and you proceed. And so on. But we need to revisit. And what do we mean by proper definition now? So we have already defined limit of a function. So the purpose of defining that limit of a function as x approaches a is actually moving towards derivative. Okay. So you all would have seen something like this. And you look at if this limit exists, that is what we call derivative. We'll come to why derivative became important. All that I'll come to in a minute. But this is something you all may have seen. And some of you may have been taught derivative from the left equals derivative from the right. So they may have defined derivative only separately. For derivative from the right, derivative from the left, it requires the two to be equal. Very different books have different such ways of doing things. Okay. Important thing is that in this definition, h equal to 0 is not allowed. because you are dividing by h. So the whatever object you are taking limit h equal to 0 is not defined. So we have to be careful in what is it that we are talking about. Okay. So one way would be the way we have defined just now. You define, let's say, g of h to be equal to this if h is not 0. So g of h is defined for both h positive, h negative. So g is defined for all other values. If f is defined for all real values, that's all. If f to begin with was defined for a to b, then we are here taking in this notation. What would happen if a was equal to 0? Well, then g is being only defined from 0 to infinity, because 0 to 0 open at both 0 is nothing. So in that case, this part vanishes and it is only 0 to infinity. But to put it back in the format that we have defined, we need to define a g and then talk about limit of g. But usually what is done is you don't do that. You just write this fx plus h minus fx divided by h. So for abundant caution, some books may say this h not equal to 0. Okay. So in some sense, continuity of a function had not drawn that much attention, because, if it is continuous, people could just look at the graph and decide, yes, it is continuous, and use it without using any definition, theorem, etc. But differentiability became useful. And in the school, I'm sure all of you first learned differentiability and then learned integration. If there is anyone who had a training which is the opposite, namely first integration and then derivative, tell me now orally or in the WhatsApp chat, in the Zoom chat window. Anybody who was first taught integration and derivative came later? No responses, so I'm taking it up.
Sir, I don't know about being taught that way, but I first came across integration before like the derivative because of like Archimedes' idea of approximating the area of like like a circle with polygons. So sort of came across integration earlier, but not explicitly. No.
Okay. Anyone else?
Sir, it was not in maths, it was in physics. In physics, we were introduced first to integration and then to differentiation. In maths, it was first differentiation, then integration.
In physics, in what context was it?
Sir, in kinematics and all, like in 11th standard. In 11th standard, kinematics and.
Interesting. So, indeed, historically, actually integration came before derivative. The idea of integration, as just now we heard about Archimedes' idea of approximation, and that was related to integration. Okay, and perhaps even the word integration was not being used, but what was being talked about is area. You draw something. I can't draw circle, so I won't say I am drawing a circle. I'm just drawing some figure. Yeah. So we want to talk about area of inside this circle, what appears like close to a circle, it's not circle, but yeah. And this was a notion which was needed very early on. Okay. Archimedes wrote about it, but perhaps it was needed even earlier. Because, objects which are not quite rectangular were being created, what weight it would have, how much amount of metal will be needed to make it, how big it is, things like that. Okay, so these were all practical issues where you needed to do things like areas for a object like this. And you just now mentioned Archimedes' idea was very simple. From that of a square, you can talk about areas of rectangles, and then from rectangles, you can go to triangles of anything, and from there, any polygon. So if it were some figure, you pick several points there and put the polygon inside. And now, if the figure is such that when you join two lines, then it is always in the line joining the two is always inside. Then you can say definitely that the area of the polygon that you have created inside is less than the area of that we are talking about. And this is what led to approximation of the area. You keep increasing these points, and therefore your areas inside will keep increasing, and whatever they increase to, that is the area of the circle. Okay. And so both these notions, length of the arc of the circle as well as area inside the circle, both these things are fundamentally important, and they went back a long time. They go back to long time. And as I said, at that time, the view was not to define something. That is obvious. There is an area. Can we assign it a number? Okay. So how to calculate the area was a focus, not how to define an area. And maybe it came in the discussion in this class, or maybe another session with another group somewhere, that in fact in Bible, there is a notion of pi in the Bible. And somebody said to me that Bible defines it as 22/7. Somebody else said to me that Bible defines it as 3.14. But there is the notion of pi in Bible. Not sure whether it is in the sense of area of the circle or length of the arc on the circle. Okay. So this was just to point out that these notions went long back, and this focus was on computation. And this is where from here, if we go to area, so you have this curve. It is all above. It's on the first axis. So x and y both positive. That quadrant, first quadrant, and then you have these points. My lines are not quite parallel to the y-axis, but that's okay. Imagine as if they are parallel to the y-axis. So you split it. So now what we have done, we have created a figure where three sides are straight lines. One is x-axis, the other two are lengths which are arcs which are or lines which are parallel to the y-axis, and only the top part is not quite a line. And then we talk about area under the curve. So what So this is sometimes called area under the curve. And so the focus shifted to, if we can talk about area under the curve, then this whole circle part can be split into so each of these four parts we can define area because of this way, and then we can add them together. So from the idea of a circle, somebody transferred it to saying that you will start doing areas under the curve, and then efforts are on to how do you define, how do you, etc., etc. And though we are going to do integration later, but here the same idea of Archimedes inside the putting polynomial, putting these figures inside the circle, polygons inside the circle, okay, leads to the following notion here. That is, we divide x equal to a and x equal to b into several parts, and then in each of these parts, I've drawn these green lines, and what is clear is now everything below the green line, the yellow parts which are below the green line are all inside the area that we are looking for. So exactly like the idea of the polygon inside the circle. Okay. So we have got a lower bound of the areas that we need to come up with. Some of you may have seen this in school. It's not that it is never taught, but maybe some have not. And this is what will be our formal way of talking about integration in the later part of the course. Okay. But whichever we do mathematically first, I like to deal with both derivative and integration together in a certain form and bring up the connection between the two. So, here we have got another thing now. I put what I have called lower bounds. Now we can also get hold of what we can call, maybe I'll continue to use this. So, this green lines hanging above the our curve, they also lead to you to a rectangle. If we add up all these rectangles, then it is certainly now, okay, here I have forgotten. So this line is wrong. So here, some part of the curve is actually going up. But if we keep increasing the points, then that will not happen. Or at each point, we look at the upper bound and we look at the line here. How do we get hold of this line will come later. But then we have managed to do a inner and outer approximation. In fact, that tells me that I should do a fresh example for this inner and outer. So This is my curve, and we are looking for area under this curve. Okay. Now, suppose we divide this x-axis. Yeah. Now, I have to take the lines join parallel to the y-axis running from here. So, in the previous example or previous graph that I had drawn, at one point I got alerted, but elsewhere I was just joining the one of the just comparing these two endpoints and joining the smaller of the two. But that got me into trouble here. Smaller it was working, but upper it was not working. So therefore, not this example, but we will do. What we try to do is that you look at this, and in each one, you try to look at the smallest possible value of the function, the largest possible. Likewise, here, smallest possible is here, largest is here. Between here and here, the smallest possible is here, but the largest possible is somewhere here. So I will have to do. So now what we have done is that in each of these intervals that we have divided our x equal to a, x equal to b, each of this we have divided, and then we have tried to see what is the smallest, what is the largest, and try to define what is the lower approximation and what I have called the outer approximation. Okay. And the area that we are looking for is certainly sandwiched between the two. Is that clear to people? So let us, today is only this informal thinking. Okay, formal definition of derivative we'll do next class, and for integration we'll do much later. But today is just exploring how we could, what is this objects that we are getting? Can we describe what is the upper bound and what is the lower bound in the graph that I have written? Okay, so let's call that the points on the x-axis, let us call them. So you have some m points, x0 is a, xm is b, and in between you have some points x1 less than x2 less than xm. All right. Now, what are these lower things that we have written? I haven't tried anything here lower, last one, so I should cover here. So it may not be matching my what the figure looks like, but it will, what I write now will match what I said in words. So lower here will be, let's call, suppose I define So in each of them is something xi minus 1 to xi. I'm counting now I equal to 1, 2 up to m. Okay, so I have m many intervals. I have divided A to B into m intervals and index them as x0 going up to xn. And then in each interval, we look at the minimum value, you look at the maximum value. And we are not requiring the function to be continuous. We don't know whether minimum and maximum will exist, but now we are working on real numbers, and infimum and supremum we can define for bounded objects. And we are saying that this curve is not going off to infinity and so on. So it's something which you can track. Okay. So infimum and supremum are defined. So now I have defined ui and vi. So this is u1, that is v1, u2, v2, u3, v3, and so on. Okay. So now can we describe what is the lower approximation and what is the outer approximation in this framework? Ui times xi minus xi minus 1 summation I equal to 1 to m, and summation I equal to 1 to m vi xi minus xi minus 1. So this is the upper bound. Sorry, this is the lower bound. This is the upper bound. This is exactly the areas of the. So one, I have added up areas of the graphs. So what inside is what it is made up of several rectangles. For each of the rectangle, we write down area and we sum them up. Likewise, outer, we look at areas of each of the rectangles and sum them up. So the areas are exactly as described here. And this leads to that if we keep increasing the points inside AB, you keep dividing this in larger and larger numbers, what happens to these two objects? Now, if I take, so this is one partition of AB, and if I take some other partition, can we always ensure that the lower bounds and upper bounds are matching? That if you have now we have more points, so can we ensure that the lower bound will only go up and upper bound will only come down? Not necessarily, because our partition points are not comparable. But if we ensure that we add all the points which are originally there, and to them we have added new points, then what will happen? Infimum can reduce. For example, let's look at this part. When I here, this is no longer the minimum part, because the minimum was coming from the right hand side. In fact, here the minimum is going up all over here. So minimum can only go up because we are taking infimum over smaller and smaller sets. And likewise, supremum will come down. So if our partitions are successively increasing, namely the original partition points are already there and you have only added new points in the partition, then this will continue to go up, this will continue to go down. And so as it goes up, it keeps increasing, so it has a limit. That object is sometimes called the inner integral. This one keep coming down. It will converge to something that is the outer integral. And if the two of them converge to the same quantity, then we will say that yes, it is integral. And the same thing can be done for area of a circle. You take inner and outer approximation and try to argue and prove that both of them will converge to pi r square. Has anyone seen a proof where for the area of a circle, to do the following? You have several such intervals inside, but take this, expand both these, midpoint, and now you have got one inner approximation and one outer approximation. You compute them and put them together, and thereby you show that the inner ones increase to pi r square, outer one decrease to pi r square, and therefore area of a circle is pi r square. Anyone seen this kind of a construction in school? No answer. So
Sir, I mean, for
9 meters.
circle,
yeah, go ahead. For circle, yes.
so for circle, this two-way thing, I mean, going from below and going from above, I did not see. But I mean, it was just in terms of some angle they defined and then integrated it.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, but this one, okay. So you can yourself try to do this example. Okay. You divide it into n parts or 2 power n parts, so that when you increase n, you are only taking successively increasing partitions. Okay. So you divide it into 2 power n parts, do this graph and look at the inner parts, look at the outer parts, and then see what happens. And you will see, using trigonometry that you have learned, that they will both converge to the same quantity. Okay. So this idea goes back a long way, and so it was understood that if this inner and outer approximations approach the same number, then that number should be the area under the curve. That is immediate. Okay. As I said, those days they didn't bother about defining the area. What are we talking about? It is understood what we are talking about. You have just to have a way of computing it. And this says that you can compute it and precisely, and you cannot, if two different people compute, you will reach to the same answer, because you have shown that the inner and outer approximations are coming close to the same number. Okay. So then the question comes back to this, our picture. For what kind of functions defined by this green color, for what kind of functions can we ensure that upper and inner both will converge to the same object? If so, then we can call that an integral, and this the common value will be the integral under the curve. Okay. So now let me come to something interesting here. That is, We have come to 2 points, okay, and we want to see what happens as we keep increasing points. So at each time, if you can get some handle on what is the lower approximation, what is the upper approximation for this interval, you can add them up and get some idea about the overall thing, right? So, and we are always only adding new points. So if we can get a thing that if you start with some interval which is very small, if for that you can get the answer, you will get it for the whole, because then you can add up. Okay. So now, let's say we have dished it out to such a small thing that the lower and upper value, the function itself is taking values only inside a curve, so inside this range. So the inner and outer are clear, and what happens now? Well, so here we can get if, for example, you are a person with numeric capabilities and you are wanting to do quickly, you say you don't care about proving this, you want a quick idea, then what would you do? Here you are saying that the inner and outer are changing, are varying a lot, okay? And the same applies for the circle. So there, what you do, you just take the line joining the lower, this point and that point. And my example is such that here the two seem to be agreeing. The line joining the point at one end and the other end are same, but let's say, let me take some other graph. Is so now what can we say about this approximate area? Now we have gone ahead, not just lower and upper, but now we are taking this triangle here where we have just joined the 2 points. And we hope that, let's say, if this our curve is continuous, then these things will keep coming close. So this is, let's say, xi minus 1, this is xi. So f this is the lower part. The outer upper part is fxi and because the upper, our curve, we are assuming that everything between this xi and xi plus 1 is between fxi and fxi plus 1. It may not be a straight line, but it is in between. That is the assumption. So the one is the minimum, one is the maximum. And then what is the area below the figure, which is looking like it is lower plus this part, but this part is exactly half of this part. So in other words, if I take average of the two, I will get what is my approximation. So if I take
Sir, I had a question.
yeah, sorry, in the multi here, this is a wrong expression I have written here. There is no f here. This is just xi. I was getting to a crazy answer, so I realized that I have made a error. let me fill this up. Maybe your question was the same thing, or if it is something else, I will come to your question.
No, sir, it was that only, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. As soon as you started, I realized that, I have made a goof up. Okay. So, all right. So now we see that this should be a rough idea of what our upper and lower bounds are, average of the two. And now if so loosely speaking, if your curve is nice, at least in some nice examples, if these are now if you sum over I and these things come close to each other, that should be the area under the curve. So yeah, this one, let me erase this because so and now we have reached this expression, which is f. and
Sir, the average that we have got, I mean, the area under the triangular edge, that thing. So that can lie above or below, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it depends on which one is larger, which one is smaller, lower and upper. So, but it will be always between the two.
Yes, sir.
So now we have come to that this is our approximate computation of the area. One will be upper bound, one will be lower bound, and we have taken half of that. Okay. And then the question comes, when will this limit exist? Okay. And our life would have been easier the way I was writing earlier, because if this was fxi and fxi plus minus 1, then we can quickly do a summation, etc., right?
So we visualize this as a series, right? I mean,
I equal to
just
1 to m, finite series. Yeah.
okay, okay, sir.
I think I missed something quite important in this definition.
Yeah.
So previously you were taking supremums and infimums, but now
Yeah.
you're considering the corners to be the supremum and infimum respectively. So
Approximately. So if our curve is such and you have taken large number of points so that the two corners are the supremum infimum, then this will be the approximation.
Okay,
As yet,
so
these are all assumptions. We are not proving anything. We are exploring the ideas. Okay. What people had tried. Okay. Now, so what happens when these 2 points, xi minus 1 and xi, keeps coming closer and closer? Well, closer and closer to what? So let's for now, let's say we fix xi. Okay. And we are coming, the lower point, we are bringing it closer and closer. Then we'll get to this value of but multiplied by a very small number, xi minus 1. Okay. So
So could you please repeat that part, that when you said that the average of fxi and fx I minus 1 times xi minus xi minus 1 will be a good approximation?
yeah. So, okay, the reason is the following, that suppose we have taken care that we are always adding points, so many points we have added that in each interval, like the one of the endpoints is the minimum and the other of the endpoint is the maximum. You do not have a scenario like we had in here, that both endpoints were smaller and in between somewhere it had gone up. If that happens, add that point here. Okay. So if you have added enough points such that the endpoints themselves are either the infimum or the supremum in each interval, then the area in each part will be average of, roughly average of the two. So that is the idea, that one is not necessarily the infimum, one is not necessarily the supremum, but if we take the average, it will be like good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you,
So
sir.
that is the idea. If we keep adding points a lot, then so I don't know, in our times when I was in school, which is now 50 years ago, in one of the first physics practical was you take a graph paper. So graph paper where, you made up of small rectangles, of course, or small squares, very tiny. And they'll say, you draw either a circle or some other thing was given. And now you look at all the squares which are completely inside and all the squares which are outside and covering the outer ones, how many of them are there? Covering inner ones, counting inner ones, how many are there? And add up these two numbers and check how many variation is there. So this idea that we are coming up was given to us as a physics practical in some class 9 or something like that. Okay. So the point is, the finer the graph that you take, the closer will be your answer, your upper and lower thing together. So this was one idea that people had tried, that it didn't immediately help them, but they tried that, okay, instead of supremum, infimum, blah, 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 you keep increasing the number of partitions, and at each one, you take the average of the two endpoints. Now it is concrete. Okay. And in good examples, you can see, later you can see that this one will give you the correct answer in good examples. Not for all functions f, but so So the argument went like this. Suppose you have some example where you have this function, you have drawn ideas are of starting with the supremum infimum, and this is one approach. This is the modern approach, but in early ages they were not interested in proving things, they wanted to quick calculation, so they actually came up with this one. You take make a large number of points, take average f in both the thing and multiply it by the length of the interval and take the sum. And they felt that, if you have taken large enough number of points, this will go. Today, what we will do is later, in the later part of the course, we will do for what values, what functions f can we argue that this one will give the right answer. Limit of these objects will give the right answer. Okay. And this maximum minimum, what I did, y, vi, and then this is what is the modern thing which we will be studying later called the Riemann integral. Okay. And so if the function f is such that as we keep increasing points, the lower and upper, outer and inner, or lower and upper, whatever words we use, both of them converge to the same quantity, then this function is called Riemann integrable, and the common value is called the Riemann integral. This will be our definition. So, especially given that this informal discussion we saw and now, and after few weeks, if we define it that way, then that one will look very natural. That is how human mind works. If I had first defined that and given this as an example, then always you are trying to connect this example with the definition given there, and you don't digest as much as you would have hopefully in this one. Here it looked very natural, though it came, this infimum supremum idea was not there till Riemann came into the picture, which is much later. What earlier idea was this average. Now, so suppose I was starting with x equal to 0 to say x equal to 1. Okay, we wanted to compute area under the curve. Now, this is the fundamental idea that suppose I can draw somewhere, somehow, a curve which is increasing, and it is such that at any, this is x equal to 0 to x equal to 1, and at x equal to t somewhere, I put together area under the curve from x equal to 0 to x equal to t and draw a curve like this. Then it will look increasing because originally my areas were kept increasing. And the point is that how will we show some connection between these two curves? The way I have written the drawn, it may not be apparent, but what is this value? It is area up to this value. What is this value? It is area up to this value. What is the difference between the two? Difference between the two is area of this portion. And this portion, the part parallel to the x-axis is one, and then part parallel to the y-axis is the other, and product of the two is the area. So this we have. So in other words, this one was little fx. Suppose somebody came up with and created a new function fx, and if you look at fxi minus fxi divided by so this area you take this value minus this value divided by the length. Then this ratio will be approximately equal to the value of this first curve in between the 2 points, length, left, right, and both. So this is what is called this taking f at one point minus f at the lower point and dividing by the length on which you have it, and then letting the two together. This will be like a derivative, and integration. This one connects, integration, derivative, connection. And now the question is, how do you get hold of f? Now that is where we will come to first. We will define what is derivative means, and it is connection with. Time is up, you may have to rush, but we'll resume our discussion from this next time and then continue and give a formal definition of derivative. Our aim is to later connect it with integration.
So,
Yeah.
so when you do this area and that area,
Huh.
we can't see your box. So I think we're missing a bit of the explanation.
Okay. So capital F at xi will be area to the left of the all this, and fx will be the f at xi will be the area, this area, and fxi minus 1 will be this area. So the difference between the two in the numerator is area between these 2 points. Okay. And if we divide it by this, so the divided by the length of the x-axis that is there in this figure, then the value is approximately f here or the average there, any of these values. So the ratio here will come close to the little f at one of these points. That is the idea. And I'll resume exactly with these pages, these 2 pages put together next class, and we'll resume the definition of derivative will come from there. But historically it came here, and then they found a whole lot of other uses of derivatives. But you have to rush for the next class. Please, you can leave. We'll resume here next class.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.